Hello. Hey, everyone. Sorry. We're live. I was just talking to Russ and Mike about a concert that's coming around. What are you guys talking about?
Yeah, we were talking about I bought tickets the other day to John Anderson's tour. I didn't realize he's the former singer, lead singer. I didn't realize it went on sale. And so I went and I was choosing between like Newark, New Jersey, which is like 90 minutes from my house where I could sit closer, or Collingswood, New Jersey, which is 25 minutes from my house, but I'd sit a little further back. And I'm going to sit a little further back so I don't have
Collingswood is the way to go. That place is amazing. You've been there before?
No, I've not been there. So
it's the Scottish Rite Theater. It was an old Masonic temple.
Oh,
my great grandfather. My family's from Collingswood. My parents both went to Collingswood High School.
They did sacrifices there.
It's a really cool building. It's like it's an incredible space. It's very small. So
I mean, I know someone who works for the Masons. I wrote a book with them actually. Not on the Masons.
Steve Mason or Dave Mason?
Not on the Masons. That's a whole other discussion. But at any rate, so we were talking about the tour, and Mike goes, "Well, let me know where he is in Buffalo because it's only like an 8-city tour so far." And sure enough, the tour ends in North Tonawanda.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. It's like
all tours go to die.
All tours go to die. The Riviera, it has to be the Riviera Theater in North Tonawanda, which I've seen Steve Hackett at, and I saw Al Stewart last May. It is a venue that not for it's maybe a couple thousand seats. So okay. Right. Now the thing is like I'm looking at the tour here, and he goes Tyson's Corner, Virginia, Baltimore, Maryland, St. Charles, Missouri, St. Charles, Illinois, Des Plaines, Illinois, North Tonawanda, New York. It's like he just goes from the Midwest all the way to friggin' North Tonawanda, this like 2,000-seat converted movie theater. I mean,
in business we call that playing the Prague circuit, Mike.
If that's the last, if that's the last concert he ever does.
Right. I mean, the only city he's missing as far as a stronghold for that kind of music would be Massachusetts, somewhere in Massachusetts.
Kind of grim, Mike, I might say. It's kind of a grim way.
I mean, okay, when a performer is in their 70s, there's a great possibility that's the last.
For sure. But
when I went to go see Paul McCartney, and you were gracious enough to buy me a ticket for Paul McCartney a few years ago, and it proved not to be. It could have been his last show in North America. Now he's toured after that. So the first time he ever plays in Buffalo could have been the last time he ever.
It still was probably the last time he'll play Buffalo, though.
Oh yeah. And that's
good.
Right. Well, I've seen him in Toronto a couple times, so it's not exactly.
Buffalo's a really good Prague city, so probably not. That's probably the place. I mean, he's around Missouri. I'm not surprised. Like there's certain Prague cities that are just big.
Okay. Well, just a little bit of rock and roll, and condolences on for all the Mac fans on the past.
Can I talk about that for a second? Because I opened for Fleetwood Mac in some shows. Like my band opened for Fleetwood Mac in 5 shows, and I mean, I got to meet her, and it's really sad. It was really, I mean, bizarre situation with her. Just like. And the whole band, when you played with them,
the band dynamic that they had.
The band dynamic was strange. Like backstage at bands are bands. It's where we played a couple places. They were usually like the big like Man Music Center outdoor type places.
Mm-hmm.
And they literally did have separate rooms like for each other.
Oh yeah.
And I'd heard about that. And you heard stories about not getting along, but they literally.
That's what happens when the guitarist and the drummer at separate times are sleeping.
They pass notes with they had people who literally pass messages because this is before texting and all that. So there were people that were passing messages. Like a guy was passing a message like if they wanted to change the song set list, this guy would have to run to each room with the set list.
I mean,
and we're instead of just getting together and saying, why don't we do this song? It was strange, but she was. Beyond cool, and
Kev, I mean, okay, Rumors was arguably, it's in the top 5, top 10 of best albums of all time. She wrote most of the song. Don't Stop, Thinking About Tomorrow, Oh Daddy, Love and Fun. Those are all Christine McVie songs.
Yeah. And they had a lot of staying power. I mean, obviously they're my generation and yet beyond. And I mean, a big, important artist in the music world, to be sure. And what an impact Fleetwood Mac had on all of us, just with their songs and their staying power.
I do want to ask Kevin what he thinks about the passing of Gaylord Perry. I did get to see him pitch when I was a kid. He was fantastic to watch. But I'm curious, you probably saw him more than I did.
Yeah. I was not as bothered by the, the spitball allegations and all that stuff. I mean, to me, it was just kind of baseball. Today, everybody gets really bothered about any element of cheating. But back then, it was kind of like, what they always say in the NHL, and they say it openly: if you're not cheating, you're not trying. That's kind of how it was with Gaylord Perry. I mean, players talked openly about, and they joked about it. They would get it was like taking a shower when you went to up to bat against him and all that kind of stuff. But he was an effective pitcher, whether he was cheating or not.
See, I think there's a subtle difference, and Russ can correct me if you think I'm wrong. I think there's a subtle difference between what Perry did with the jalapeno on his nose, or the KY jelly, or whatever he did, or Mike Scott with the scuffing, or Joe Niekro with the emery board, the individual cheating, as opposed to the team cheating like the Astros did. I think that there's a distinction. I think that
I mean, those are two different categories.
Yeah, it's on a different level.
Bring them up in the.
It's completely different.
Yeah, I don't even.
Here's what I would say about Perry, for one, because I sat very close to one of his games when he was an older pitcher. He didn't load up once. I was watching intently as a kid to see if he would. I don't think he used the spitball in his last 10 years of pitching in the league, but he just faked it.
But it was psychological, Russ, because you remember he used to do he touched the hair,
he touched the hat, he did,
and that drove batters crazy.
Yeah, I don't know if it drove all batters crazy. I think it was more of a. I completely agree with Russ that his last years, it was just a reputation.
Yes.
But again, it's like when we talk about before about, we make blanket statements, or at least Mike does, about how teams react to what is going on the ice. And it's been my observation that it's, there always might be one or two that get all hot and bothered, and the rest of them, they're professionals. They just play through it and shrug at what it is. And
he was a great pitcher. Won a couple Cy Youngs. We don't want to diminish him as just a cheating guy.
Oh no, not at all. He was a very effective pitcher, and I think he was a pretty well liked guy from Yeah. So, but I got a little thing. I just thought it was kind of fun while all you guys were talking about rock and roll. I got a Christmas list for one of my grandchildren. And the grandchild is Solomon Patrick Allen, who was born last night. So he was born in the middle of the night, and I just got a Christmas list from his mother.
Well, hopefully it's not a Kent Nielsen jersey.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, congrats.
That's my sixth grandchild.
That's crazy.
It's my second grandson, and the first one with the last name of Allen. Because my other grandson was my daughter, who's married, and he is a Demick, not an Allen. So
right. That's great.
Congratulations.
That's amazing. Wow, good stuff. That makes me
born in Chicago. That's
where in Chicago.
Yeah.
Well, make sure that he doesn't become a Cub fan. That'll be a lifetime.
He will, and he'll have a lifetime of losing. That's
I'm in South Carolina. I think we brought that up before. I'm visiting another daughter here. My wife and I are here, but we'll be in Chicago to see Solomon Patrick Allen on Tuesday when we get back.
That's great.
Yeah, just one other thing that Russ and I can agree on before we disagree. There are rumors out there, which I think are completely unfounded, that Tom Brady may go back to New England next year, which I think is horse crap, because the last thing Tom Brady's going to do is give Bill Belichick, give him a lifeline after he won a Super Bowl on his own in Tampa. But last night, I think we're safe to say that we saw the death knell of the New England Patriots as a serious contender. They were eliminated from the playoffs. Now, the Bills didn't play a particularly great game, but that in and of itself They played an okay game, and they still beat them by 14 points. It was a pop gun offense with the Patriots. So
they didn't have a very good run, Mike. I agree with you there.
They didn't have a very good run.
The Patriots didn't have a very good run.
Oh no, only 2 decades. That's
It's okay if they miss the playoffs, I think.
but the article about Brady, and then we'll start the show, was just the ultimate clickbait. That's all.
Yeah, that's the equivalent of me going back to play quarterback for my high school.
Yeah.
All right, ready, folks? Here we go.
Mm-hmm.
It is Friday, second. Okay. A friend of mine's birthday today. I gotta just remember. All right. Well, Hockey World. It is Friday, December 2nd, 2022.
I'm Michael Agello, and you're not.
I'm Russ Cohen. Like, how do you forget it's the second day of a month? Like, the month just started. Like, come on.
I don't know, Mike. You don't know, Russ.
I'm Kevin Allen.
And I'm Eklund. Hopefully not doing the last podcast I'll ever do. And you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. It's a podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And I really have to start today with something because Jason Robinson, and this is really got to be talked about because last night he scored his 53rd goal in a calendar year, right? Which surpasses the previous record of 50 goals in a calendar year, I think, by Austin Matthews, right? And if I was, make sure I have this right. I wrote it down just because I didn't want to mess it up, but I was hoping Mike.
Well, he scored a hat trick last night against Anaheim. He has 22 goals now, so he's got about a 6-goal lead in the Rocket Richard. 10 goals over Austin Matthews, but Matthews is just sort of starting to get rolling. So like he did last year, he started to get rolling early November, and then he just kept scoring consistently. So it's going to be a good race, but.
Right. In the 2022 calendar year, Matthews has 52. He has 53. I'm sorry.
Right. Kev, the thing that everybody looks at is the Robertson contract signed just before the season, him at less than $8 million, and him scoring like it's going out of style. And that deal looks like a grand slam home run for Jim Nill.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. And I think he's gotten a lot of credit for the Hintz deal as well.
Yes.
But I doubt whether Robertson's thinking about that. I really don't think that's high on his list that that he got that he lost money. People may tell him that. So, but anyway, the point I wanted to make is how many games has he played now? He has 22 goals in 24 games. 23.
I'll double check, but I think you're right.
Yeah. What is that?
Yeah, well, I mean,
I know what Kevin's thinking of. I know what his.
Yeah, I am going there. I mean, first of all, scoring is up, around the league, and it's been 30 years since we had a 70-goal scorer. And I wonder, if anybody has a shot, is it Robertson? We've seen Ovechkin have these runs where he gets 23 goals in 21 games, or 22 goals in 24 games, but generally they're toward the end of the year. So to have someone really just forge out of the chute here like this and what is it, Mike? Is it 22 and 24?
22 and 24, yeah. So he could get 50 and 50 at this.
He could do the Gretzky record.
Yeah.
Well, Gretzky was 50 and 39. Bossy was 50 and 50.
Yeah, it was Bossy. Sorry, you're right. 50 and 39.
Yeah, I mean, even if he didn't make it, I think it would be fun. And, with scoring up the way it is and, for a variety of reasons, I think it would be fun if we could get like Austin Matthews, as Mike said, cranked up and go back to those times. I think we had 2 that one year, didn't we? Didn't McGillney and Solani both hit 70?
Yeah, 76. Both had 76.
Yeah. So
right now he's my heart guy. I was
California Flash. Trying to come up with a name for him. California Flash, is that good? We need a nickname for this kid. The California Flash. I mean, this is another American kid.
Yeah, he is an American kid. He's
What about last season he can play on the same line in the next Olympics?
He's a Panama
why
American.
would you say California?
Yeah,
He's born in Arcadia.
Okay. Yeah, because I know he was all over the place.
They had to move from California to Michigan so they could find competitive hockey. That's what they did it for both kids. The parents really, I think one of the parents is a doctor, so they really had to take up their stakes. I've written about Jason for sure, but end of the day, he's my MVP right now.
Right.
Oh, gosh, there's no question about it, right? I mean, if he gets.
Well, okay, Russ. Let's bring up the discussion that we had. Who was the player that is on a team? Oh, Erik Karlsson. There were people saying Erik Karlsson is a legitimate heart candidate. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
it was said on Sirius.
Whoever said that has a screw loose, because nobody can be a legitimate Hart candidate on a team that doesn't make the playoffs and will miss it by 20 points. This isn't Andre Dawson.
Here's how I'll phrase it to Kevin and Eck, and let them answer. The way that person, I'm not going to say who it is, but it was mentioned on Sirius yesterday. He works for a big outlet. An MVP means the most valuable player to their team. So, of course, Erik Karlsson is that. My argument is, okay, but with Erik Karlsson, they are really, really bad. They stink.
Yes.
So what would they be, like 5, 6, 7 wins worse?
They'd be less stinky.
Yeah. So I mean, I couldn't give them the award based on that.
More stinky.
It's not that they're not a playoff team. It's just that the team is so bad that they're going to still really be bad without them. That's my problem.
You can call them the more valuable player.
Yeah. Yeah, I struggle with this because I have beat the drum pretty hard about the fact that I never liked it when writers applied their own rules to trophy voting. You should use the rules, and nowhere does it say that you can only give it to a playoff team. Yet we do that. Yet to me, that feels differently than when you say, I'm not going to vote for someone for Rookie of the Year because they're 24 and there are some good 18-year-olds there. That's just seems different to me because, when you're measuring most valuable, I think you do have to take into consideration what's happening with the team, as Russ just laid out. So I think that's legitimate. I have a hard time not putting in a guy for MVP that couldn't do enough to get his team in the playoffs. So,
or even close to it.
No, I mean, it's legitimate. I mean, and it really does make you think about like the whole.
Speaking of Karlsson, because we've talked about him, and I was stunned by this because I don't know, is there anybody who has a better handle on what's happening in the trade market than Elliot Friedman? I don't think so.
Either him or Pierre LeBrun.
I have the greatest respect in the world for Pierre as well, but it just seems like Friedman just talks to more people. I mean, I could be wrong on that, but anyway, regardless, I think we have great respect on that. And did he not say that? He even said, I don't know how he would do it, but he thought the Florida Panthers and Karlsson.
He mentioned it that I remember him talking about this on a recent podcast. He said that there was that in act I know that you mentioned it in connection with Bobrovsky a while back.
No, I wrote it along 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. But the thing is, he didn't mention Bobrovsky. He did mention the fact that they would be interested in Karlsson, and that it would make sense based on where they really need to improve, because their defense is, I think, not at a level that could win a Stanley Cup. But I don't know how the hell they pull it off, because, I mean, short of trading Bobrovsky, and why would San Jose want Sergei Bobrovsky? I looked at this. Bobrovsky has 3 years left at $10 million. Karlsson has 4 years left at 11.5. The only motivation here in terms of San Jose is one less year and $16 million saving. But the problem is that Bobrovsky, the way he's played in the last 4 or 5 weeks, he looks done. And
the biggest issue you'd have in this trade, and I know this for a fact, is Bobrovsky wouldn't leave.
Right.
Like he's got to waive that. So that's like that at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Bobrovsky didn't want to leave Florida. They tried. I mean, Columbus. They tried to move him out of Columbus a couple times. He didn't want to leave there.
Right.
But like the idea here that he would leave Florida, it's just not happening. I mean,
and I know dollars and cents sometimes doesn't matter, Kev, but when you have $10 million in a no-tax state like Florida, and you're trading them to the heaviest or second heaviest tax state in California, both beautiful places to live, but you're being traded from a team that won the President's Trophy last year to a team that is destined for last place for the next couple years in Northern California. I mean, if I were Bobrovsky, I wouldn't agree to it.
Yeah, I don't even think the Bobrovsky thing like that. That wasn't. I think that was a couple weeks ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, Karlsson happened. The note was yesterday, I think.
Yes. He's talked about it. He's talked about.
No, but I mean, I think he's moved beyond the Bobrovsky thing.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, everything you just said Friedman, also said, he just said it in fewer words. He basically said, I don't understand how that could get done.
Right.
But, he's still hearing it. So, which is kind of what Epka's been talking about.
Right.
That, it's out there, even though nobody knows.
I think this is funny because I think people are giving Bill Zito maybe a little more credit here than he should, than any GM deserves. They think Zito, they think he's been very creative with his abilities to do things, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's been other players like Jack Eichel was somebody that they looked into, but you can't do that.
I did think, speaking of rumors, that it was quoted that day, and I don't even remember where I read it, but I know one of you guys will have seen it too. Somebody quoted an anonymous GM said there's more teams talking about who aren't involved in the Jacob Chikrin sweepstakes talking about what's happening than those who are actually in it. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, which I thought was a good line. Now, one other thing regarding rumors that I wanted to bring up, and I forgot to do it last time. We had talked about Jonathan Toews, and I thought that they wouldn't be able to get a first-round pick. And I subsequently talked to a GM and said, oh, yeah, it's going to be a first-round pick, only because of the competition. There are several teams that are interested and that they are going to be able to get a first-round pick because the Blackhawks are going to eat the salary as well. And the most important thing is that you'll be done with Jonathan Toews as soon as the season is over. Like, that used to be a negative.
Yeah.
And he said, now it is very much positive. Nobody wants to add any contracts, and nobody wants to deal with that. But that's why he said it's going to be a first-round pick. The competition and the fact that he's completely free. So,
and on top of that, Kev, the word "done" is something extreme. He's not done. He's shown this year the health problems that he's had.
Well, I mean, they wouldn't even be considering it if he wasn't playing.
Right. I mean, he's got. I think he had 8 or 9 goals in like the first 15 or 16 games. He's playing closer to the way Jonathan Toews has played in the past. If he was not, nobody would be interested.
Well, yeah, I mean, that just goes without saying. We wouldn't be discussing it if he wasn't playing well.
Such a big leader, and such like a classic, Captain Canada, right? Like he's like one of those Captain Canada type guys. And people who doesn't want to add that for a playoff run? I mean, that's like the dream edition, like to any team who's going for it.
I just looked.
Go ahead, Mike.
I just looked up what Elliot Friedman wrote in his column about Karlsson. It's 2 lines. It's extremely difficult puzzle to piece together, but I do think Florida would have interest in Erik Karlsson. Not sure how it could happen, though. And that's the thing.
He pretty much said everything you said, but he said it in a fewer words.
In 2 sentences.
It doesn't make, how in the world could you possibly get that done? And yet, I'm sure, he keeps hearing it. I did want to talk about, since it's really fresh news, Tyler Bertuzzi. And I want to talk about it on 2 levels. First of all, on the impact on the Red Wings in terms of their competitiveness. He was hurt in the second game of the season. He was a 30-goal scorer last year, and we all know he's a belligerent player. Yep. So he adds a layer of aggressiveness, and he's hard to play against, and he's just always there. He's an irritant, and plus he scores. He's had 2 20-goal seasons before he had the 30-goal season. So he gets injured in the second game, blocking a shot to his right hand, has to have surgery. Comes back after 4 weeks instead of 6 weeks, 4 weeks, plays 7 games. And then the other night, he's standing in front of the net, and his own player, Ben Sherratt, cranks a slap shot, hits his left hand, breaks that. Surgery this morning, 6 weeks. Now, from the Red Wings' perspective, they're averaging more than 3 goals a game now, and they were looking forward to finally getting their lineup back. Robbie Fabre is coming back. So Bertuzzi and Fabre are 2 of their top 6 forwards, and they were looking forward to, in January, having both those back. Now, Bertuzzi is out again. But here's the other perspective, too. Bertuzzi, we don't know because Eisman doesn't talk about contracts, but the contract situation with Bertuzzi, he'll be a free agent in the summer. It doesn't seem to have gone anywhere. We don't hear anything about any progress or anything else. So, and same thing with Dylan Larkin. It's hard for me to believe that Eisman trade Larkin, who's very popular. He's a hometown guy. I think it would be more like a Stamkos situation when he would just let him go to free agency and say, talk to us before you head elsewhere. But I think he might trade Bertuzzi. So now, like, how is this going to impact his trade value? This would be the second season out of the last 3, I think, where he's going to have played a very small number of games.
Yeah.
So there'll be questions about, okay, is he really a 30-goal scorer? Is he just an unlucky guy? But anyway, it's
the kind of injuries they are definitely not going to affect it too much. Like I think it's not like a knee injury, right?
No.
So it's obviously a freak injury.
Yeah.
But I mean, okay, certain players, durability issues, and it doesn't have to be one particular thing, can affect the market. Now, he's a good enough player, Kevin. He's one of those pain in the ass players that teams would love to get for the playoffs. So maybe that mitigates the decrease in his value based on his durability, but I still think it'll affect it a little bit. I mean, Ross, so what do you think?
I think he's tradable. I think that and we're talking about Bertuzzi, right?
Yeah,
I think he's really tradable. Yeah.
He's tradable.
I don't know if I think a team that's a good team could trade a first for him. I do. I think if it's a team near the bottom that feels like, they need somebody else, they want someone with term. If Yzerman has him signed, that helps because then it's a known quantity. If he's got a contract in the drawer, that's a factor too.
But the question I have, Kev, is, okay, they've played a lot of this season without him, and they're in a playoff spot. He comes back. That may convince Yzerman, well, we can make the playoffs or at least contend for a playoff spot without him. With Larkin, I think they trade him. They're done. They're not in a playoff spot. But with Bertuzzi, they might be able to trade him and still be competitive. And it depends on what. Yeah,
because I think you're going to get the standard top player package.
You get a player in the first round.
You're going to get a first-round pick player and another
prospect first. Yeah.
I mean, he helps you in multiple ways.
Yes.
So I think they'll get that. But it is kind of a complication. For the.
I think he has to be signed to get that. I don't think you're going to get that haul if he's a rental.
I think you will. Yeah.
I don't know. That's where I'm not sure.
There were so many teams that were interested in him.
Yeah.
When they weren't even interested in trading him. So
he's the type of player that contending teams want because he's a pain. Like I can see him on the Islanders. I can see him on the Leafs. I could see him on the Rangers. It's like that's a spark plug, a guy with skill and a spark.
Yeah, I mean, Lamone brought him up when he talked about him. He just pointed out that he's actually struggled since coming back from the first injury. He only has 3 points in 7 games. But he said, our scoring chances have gone up just having him around because, he goes hard to the net. And, not as many guys go to the net as you think they do, but Bertuzzi does.
Yeah.
Right.
And he goes and whenever there's trouble, first in line when there's trouble. And, he's very well liked. And who's one of his closest friends on the team? Dylan Larkin.
Kev, I wanted to ask you about Larkin because
I'm sorry, 1 second, Mike. Why would they move him for that, or would they? Does he want to? Do you think he doesn't want to sign there again, or
no? I just think there's tension between him and Yzerman. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to read because it's they've negotiated a couple of contracts since with him, and they didn't. Neither one of them went smooth. There's a sense that Bertuzzi wants to talk too much about his individual statistics, and that's not the way Yzerman operates. He wants you to come in and say, when you're lobbying for a new contract, what do you do to make my team better? Which Bertuzzi could do, honestly. Yeah. But apparently he doesn't want to do that. He wants to come in and talk. I scored 30 goals, and this guy scored 30. Again, I don't know this is true because you just never get a sense from Yzerman because he won't talk about it, about the negotiations or why they went wrong. But there's always been a sense that there's tension. And of course, there was a vaccination issue as well.
Sure. Didn't help.
which is not an issue anymore. So
But it didn't help,
I mean, I think if Yzerman could get Bertuzzi for what he wants to sign him for, I think he would sign him. Like, I don't think there's dislike of the player, but clearly they're not at close, or one of them.
You don't think Yzerman's going to let that ride past the deadline, do you?
Well, I mean, again, this is total speculation and projection on my part. I think he would be unwilling to let Larkin go longer, just like he let Stamkos go, because there's some similarities there. I mean, obviously, Larkin's not as accomplished as Stamkos was, but captains, popular in their cities, have said publicly they want to stay where they're at. Stamkos said he wanted to stay in Tampa. Larkin has said, I got no desire to go elsewhere. I grew up rooting for this team. All that kind of stuff. So there's some similarities there. So I think he would let him go, but I think he would not. He would want to get something for Bertuzzi because he knows his value. And teams have called about Bertuzzi frequently since Yzerman took over. People like Bertuzzi.
Yeah.
So,
I can state quite categorically that before the pandemic, when he was injured, Toronto called Detroit about Bertuzzi. There were so many Bertuzzi to Toronto rumors, and I don't know if I'm sure he's a left winger. He would fit in perfectly in the top six with them. But salary wise, he's making $4.75 million. That's a tough ticket, especially when the Leafs are probably looking to add a defenseman. So I'm not sure, but
yeah, I mean, Bruins. He was born to be a Bruin.
He really was.
Colorado would probably be interested if they.
It reminds me a lot of that player. He's not quite, but who did end up as a Bruin was the St. Louis Blue. I can't think of him. Big U.S. hockey player, center.
Oh, David Backes.
Yeah, I get like a little bit of the David Backes thing with him sometimes.
Yeah, but Backes was over the hill when he went to Boston.
Yeah, but I get the same kind of stuff, like the same kind of player. But Backes maybe a little bit more character, obviously, but or higher character from what we've seen so far. But
wanted to touch on this because I think Russ, we talked about Shesterkin a couple days ago that he was really hard on himself after a bad performance. Yeah, last night, Jacob Markstrom was the same way after they lost to Montreal. And so, you had a couple goaltenders. Jack Campbell should be hard on himself based on the way he played against Minnesota. Terrible stats. But the goaltending, what's going on, and now Thatcher Demko goes down in Vancouver, and it looks like a serious injury. So goaltending is sort of front and center right now with a lot of teams.
Yeah. It is. The one thing I'll say about Shesterkin is he's like this old school goalie that he shoulders it all. So like if there's one bad goal that he's given up, he blew the game for the team. That's the way he feels. Right. I think Markstrom's saying it because I think of his contract that he knows the pressure on him in Canada and sort of feels that. Where Shesterkin, I think that's just been his normal upbringing. The Demko injury is going to probably change the goaltending market. Not so much for the Canucks because they'll go with
Spencer Martin,
and they'll be okay. I mean, they're not going to make the playoffs anyhow. I don't think so. I don't think it's going to affect that, but I think it is going to affect just how many will actually be good and available at the deadline because there are teams that will need them, and so I think that's where I can bring it in, but that's where I think it's going to start to be an issue.
Well, like Markstrom his quote last night was just crazy. I mean, if you're in the locker room, you're asking guys what's going on, with your game and stuff like that, how you feeling? He's like, I'm just no good at hockey now. That's what he said. When you hear a guy say that, whoa, you realize there's no question about a guy's confidence being not good at that point. He's a professional hockey goalie making millions of dollars. I'm just no good at hockey right now. And it wasn't, they only gave him 2 goals last night. It wasn't that bad, but one of them was iffy. But the issue was he got outplayed by Jake Allen, who had 49 saves, and Montreal only had 19 shots, 20 shots. So that I've been a goalie in that situation. That's the worst kind of game you can possibly be in. Like when you're a goalie, you get, you lose 2-1, your team outshot the other team by over 2-1 margin. That's a bad feeling. You tell there was a lot of stuff coming at once. I think Markstrom's going to be okay. I'm not as worried about him as I am about Vancouver, to be honest. I wrote about Vancouver today.
This is what and Random Canuck, thanks for typing this out because I would have had to say it. Being somebody who's covered the Leafs for a long time and covered Jack Campbell for all the time that he was in Toronto, extremely, extremely hard on himself, even when it wasn't his fault, to the point that I think it was a failure in his character. You don't take, I mean, I understand as a good teammate, you take on responsibilities for the things that you do. He was taking responsibility for the things that he didn't do. And it was almost like, like a sort of a woe is me type of thing, Kev. And I think sometimes that's disconcerting to teammates. It's like, okay, take on responsibility for what you did. But in Campbell's instance in Edmonton, he's simply not played that well. He's feeling the pressure. Stuart Skinner is playing most of the big games now. He played the second of back-to-back, which is like the backup playing. And his save percentage is .872. And there's talk about him like they take a break from the team for a week to get away, that type of thing, or take a break away from talking to the media. That's tough to do in a Canadian market.
Yeah. And I think I don't think people want him to take a break from the game. I think they want him just not to speak to the media about it all. And I think you're right on, Mike, about the teammates don't like one time, they'll stand up and say, that's ridiculous. We're all in this together. He's saved our bacon more often than not. Right. But if you repeatedly do that, it's almost like it's your own insecurity and you need your teammates to kind of, then they start not to like that. They don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, confidence. If you don't have confidence, it's not very attractive.
Yeah.
I want to bring up one other goalie issue because with the Buffalo Sabres, I've been tracking Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, and he wasn't having a good AHL season. They didn't pick up anybody to replace Comrie when he got injured. They just brought him up, and in 4 games, he's given up 17 goals. And I kind of wonder now, how far down the road are they going to take this before they wonder, like, hey, shouldn't we send him back because he's not really playing at the top of his game, and we can't really evaluate him like this.
Well, there's
got to be a point soon.
I watched a good chunk of that game during commercial breaks and halftime of the Bills game, and I saw 3 goals that Colorado scored. Nathan McKinnon, I think, had 5 points, so he went hog wild, which I lay on the fact that the Sabres were just playing horrific defense. I mean, there were a couple instances where Luukkonen actually made a nice save on McKinnon when he was like wide open 1-on-1. So they weren't doing him any favors. But the one goal that McKinnon scored, Russ, I've never seen a goalie more out of position in my life. McKinnon was in between the faceoff circles, in the slot, and Luukkonen was standing on the right side of the goal. He gave McKinnon half the net. I mean, I've said this, and I'll continue to say it. The Sabres, based on the way they approached this season, they were not serious about contending for a playoff spot. Because if you're going with a 41-year-old Craig Anderson and a career backup in Eric Comrie, you're not serious. If they were going out and they traded for Varlamov or they signed Campbell or whatever, then I would have believed that they were serious. But they weren't. So, this is in a way.
This is their goalie of the future that they could be damaging, or they should worry about his psyche at this point in time.
Unless they think the goalie of the future is Devin Levi, who supposedly is on the way to winning his 2nd straight Richter Award. And if that's the case, then Luukkonen, they were going to give Luukkonen a shot this year to prove them wrong. But in the end, they may walk away from Luukkonen at the end of this year if they think Levi is the number 1.
All right.
The thing about Anderson is, he's old, but he's actually played pretty well. I mean, he's got a save percentage that is right in there with, with an average goalie playing for a team that gives up a lot of opportunities, and his goals against average is under 3, and goals against averages are creeping up because teams are scoring more. So I think Anderson hasn't been as bad of an option as we thought it was going to be.
No, he was really good in that shootout against Detroit. So I mean, it's just Sorry,
He's this generation's Bunny LaRock, you know.
Well,
Remember Bunny LaRock was a goalie who just went on forever, like played forever.
We talked about Jacques Plante. Jacques Plante went to like 45.
Yeah. I mean, just
Please. I remember Bunny LaRock after he was in Montreal. He went to Toronto, and it
was not good. Every city at one point.
Speaking of Buffalo, though, I wonder if anyone else feels the same way. You know, it's one thing to be a points guy. You know, there are guys in this league who get a lot of points, and they're really good hockey players. But, you know, they pound goals in, and they're in the right spot. You know, they get good hockey IQ. And then there are other guys who got magic. And I'm starting to think that Tage Thompson has magic. Like, you watch him in his hands now, and it's really remarkable what he does with the puck. And, you know, just to get himself in position to shoot sometimes with a toe drag here and sliding the puck
He's
between.
One of the best one-timers in the league because when he gets his force behind it, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's not only productive, but I think he's got magic.
That goal he scored against Tampa Bay last week, Kev, where took it from behind the net and a series of stick handling moves and beat Vasilevsky. It was Matthews-like, and that's because Austin Matthews is one of the best stick handlers in close in the league, and Thompson has got he's a bigger dude, he's lankier, he's I think probably just as strong as Matthews. His problem, and Russ can attest to this, was durability. He was hurt for like 2 or 3 years. He could not stay healthy. I saw him in the press box in Buffalo a ton of times, and I was looking up at this guy because he's a giant, and now he seems to have found his way, whatever. He's shaken off the injuries, and now he just is a scoring machine.
You go back to his UConn days. He was 32 points in 36 games, 32 points in 34 games. But for whatever reason, when he went to the next level, even in the AHL, wasn't what you would hoped he would be. And, this is where I think that sometimes we have to say, all right, it does take some of the bigger power forward guys time to develop, and he's 25, and now he's at the height of his game.
Well, do we want to call him a power forward, or do we want to call him a skilled center? I mean,
he's the number one center.
He fits either. So
he's kind of Joe Thornton-like, like in some ways, but
I think there's something there. I mean,
that's good, but I think he's got even more magic than Joe.
Yeah,
he's
got more shooting magic.
Impressed by
passing magic, right? Joe was a passing magician.
Yes.
But did this something really interesting that you brought up, Kevin? That really just fascinating. I never thought about this. So Tage Thompson, like you said, where he's very good because at the long stick, like bringing it in, changing the angle of his shots, right?
Yeah.
The other guy who's really good at that in this league is Austin Matthews, right? I think Austin Matthews is the other guy that's just. What do these guys have in common?
Well, they're both American.
They're both from Arizona. They're both from Arizona, actually. Like Tage Thompson was born in Arizona too. I don't know.
Is he from Arizona though?
Yeah, I don't know if he was from there, but he was born there.
I'm pretty sure I'll double check.
Wherever his dad was coaching, that's where he grew up.
He was born
right.
Yeah, because I don't think that people see him as an Arizona, but maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, I don't know how long he was in Arizona because I was wondering if there was something they were being taught there in the youth hockey of Arizona to teach those kids how to do
that. I think with this one, it's just look. He got drafted in the first round for a reason. He was really, really good in college. Everybody saw that he was big. Nobody saw him as a center, and that was, on Buffalo did great, and Don Granado did a great thing by switching him. And now it's like everything has clicked for him. Like everything that was missing for the last 2 seasons hasn't been missing. And so we're just seeing a guy that, again, there are guys in all sports that gel late. But you don't know who they're going to be, and he's just one of them.
But here's the optimistic thing for Sabres fans, and God forbid, that I speak optimistically about Buffalo. But Thompson is, I think, a legitimate number one center. Dylan Cousins is starting to show a scoring touch. He's got a big shot. He's a big kid, strong. Yeah. You've got secondary players. I mean, Alex Tuck is a leader who wanted to be in Buffalo, so he was actually thankful that he was part of the Eichel deal. They've got 2 linchpin number one defensemen in Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin. So, I mean, the pieces are there. It's just they have to fill in those sort of secondary roles, and they have to get a goaltender. And the other thing, like, last Saturday there was talk about Buffalo being the dark horse on Chychrun. I don't know if that's the right move, but if you add Chychrun to that defensive core, that's really strong. I mean, then I think there were like 2 or 3 players away from being a playoff team.
Yeah, I do want to answer the chat room because Tage has a brother, Tice, who's not as big but has a tremendous shot. I did get a chance to see him live in college, and I've seen him since. And yeah, yes, he's having trouble finding his way. But because it took Tage a while, the Devils are going to be very, very patient with him because, again, he's good on the power play and he has a great shot. If the shot's not falling, they're still going to wait on Tage Thompson because there is something there.
And talk about how time changes perspective. Everybody said, okay, the Buffalo Sabres got absolutely raped in the Ryan O'Reilly deal because O'Reilly won the Conn Smythe when they won the Stanley Cup. Right. Now, okay, Patrick Berglund is no longer, Sobotka is no longer. They got Tage Thompson in that deal. And Ryan O'Reilly's not having a good year and is an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. Now all of a sudden that deal looks pretty good for the Sabres.
Yeah. No, it absolutely does. I agree. That's
taking the long, that's playing the long game, and it worked out for him. Like
I wanted to talk about Ryan Miller for a second because he was inducted into the USA Hockey Hall of Fame yesterday. Mm-hmm. And also I heard an interview with him where they asked him about Jack Campbell in the interview, which was interesting. And he said not to worry about Jack. He's like, Jack will get there. He's like, he's a lot like I is. He's inside his head sometimes. I was inside my head sometimes too. But like he's a tough kid and he's a competitor. He'll straighten himself out. I wouldn't worry about him at all. I know he's a great goalie. But which was was encouraging. But is Ryan Miller a Hockey Hall of Famer? Like a USA Hockey Hall of Famer? Is he a Hockey Hall of Famer?
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
I mean, is he a Hockey Hall of Famer if USA wins that game?
No.
If he stops Crosby on that the golden goal,
he might
not in. So
he might be a Hockey Hall of Famer had he won that game and had he won Game 7 against Carolina and the Leafs and the Sabres won the Stanley Cup in 2006.
Yes, then he would be a Hall of Famer if those two things happen.
Kind of a shame. I mean, none of those things are really on him. Really.
I mean, do you think he's better than Mike Richter? I mean, that's
of course not. I'm always going to. Mike Richter is.
But he can't get in. But
the two biggest, the three guys in the Hall of Fame: Mike Richter, Alex aren't in the Hall of Fame, McGillney, and Patrick Elias. They all should be in the Hall of Fame. There's no two ways about it, right?
Yeah, I don't disagree on any of them.
And I'm head of the Curtis Joseph. Wing.
I think Miller's every bit as good as Curtis.
I would say this: if Chris Osgood would have won Game 7 in 2009, he'd be in the Hall of Fame because he would have been the Conn Smythe Trophy winner.
Right. And it would have been 3 Stanley Cups, wouldn't it?
But then he would have to be in. I agree.
Yeah. So, because he was headed for the Conn Smythe, he had played great in that series.
Yeah, and I think if Buffalo beats Carolina in that Game 7 and they don't lose all their players into injury, like Jay McPhee and all those guys go down.
Yeah,
I think Buffalo goes on to beat Edmonton, and then Ryan Miller's the Conn Smythe probably in that year. So
he could have been. Yeah,
he was up there, and Briere had a good playoff too. But there was a lot of different things that that team. I think in when you list all time great American goalies, Miller is top 5. Kevin.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Easily.
Right? Richter, Van Beesbrook,
Brimsick.
Yeah,
I mean, where do you put Miller?
Brasso.
Right?
Jonathan Quick.
Quick's a Hall of Famer, right? We all think Quick's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer.
Multiple Stanley Cups, right? But so is that
right there? We got 5. Right there, we have 5 or 6. So it's a tight race.
Yeah,
it's tough to say that I do feel bad that I really feel like Miller was good enough. The other thing I always like to look at too with Hall of Fame, and this is not looked at enough, but was he the best goalie in the league for a period of time? And he was. Ryan Miller was the best.
Maybe for 2 years, maybe.
I feel like he was for a couple of years. Yeah, like I think that he was that good, and I think that his performance in Vancouver was incredible too. Like in 2010, he was definitely. I mean, that was a heroic performance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's one of those guys. It's there are guys like that have great careers, and you say they're really good, and you're like, leaders of teams and sometimes best on the team, and they still aren't good enough to make it.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. And I mean, obviously, Richter should go in first.
Yeah, I mean,
but I do, and Kev, you can straighten me out here. I do think that players who have success in big markets have an advantage. That's why, like, Cujo is a legend in Toronto for that 4 years where he made the conference final twice. Richter with the Rangers breaks the 54-year-old curse. He wins the 96 Canada World Cup.
World Cup, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have distinct advantages that eventually they'll get in. Whereas a Barrasso, even though he won 2 Stanley Cups and he had this unbelievable year as an 18-year-old where he wins the Vezina and the Calder, and we know, like, he's not exactly well liked in hockey circles, that may affect him. And a guy like Miller, who played most of his career in Buffalo and played the end of his career in Vancouver as sort of a 1B, that hurts his legacy more than helps it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much, I don't think, the size of the market, but I think visibility is a big issue. Like, like if there's something about you anomaly. I mean, Hasek, of course, was so dominant that it didn't matter. But if he had been a little less, if he had won less, if he hadn't won in Detroit and all that kind of stuff, I don't think it would have hurt him that he was in Buffalo because
he transcended.
He was such a distinctive player. That he, everybody knew everything about him.
Here's the one thing I would debate, and I'll ask Kevin this because he would know people on the board. What I always feel like the problem with the people on the Hall of Fame board is there's probably too many that are Canadian, probably not enough European. I don't think they have enough mix of everything. And
well, they really do. They really do try. I mean, they have a couple members of the media. They always have a mix of former players. In my last year, I think it was Bobby Orr's first year. I remember, they do, like, they replace the media guy with the media guy. So, I'm not sure that is ever the problem. I think it's a hard job. Like, you're really splitting hairs, and there is strategy involved, and people hate this, but there's no other way to do it. These players, even when they're retired, they're still competing,
right?
Because it took Mark Howe forever to get in because of the competition. If the way I always used to approach my ballot is, okay, I'm going to separate the guys that I think deserve to be in, and then you got to look at it from, okay, who's up that year, and kind of sort it out. And then if you're going to be on it for an extended time, like I did, I start to think about, well, what's going to happen to these guys moving forward? And you do, in your mind, have to develop some kind of strategy, because my goal was to get as many of the guys in who deserve to be in. That's good, in my time on the board. Yeah. But, I didn't want to put in anybody that didn't deserve to be in. I'm just trying to get the guys in who deserve to be in. That's all I'm trying to do.
Are there other guys on the board that aren't doing that, Kevin, that are more?
I don't know. I've never talked to anyone else about that.
Yeah.
But I think you have to do that in your own mind. I mean, you've got to sort of figure it out. And it doesn't, you don't automatically come up. Like, some people think it's like baseball where I mean, I don't know. I mean, it could be that way now because I've been on several years. But when I was on, you weren't automatically, just because you had been out of the league 3 years, aren't automatically eligible. You had to be nominated. And sometimes people didn't put people up because they knew that over the next 3 years, you were bringing, like, these guys were coming up, like the Sedins. It was great timing for them to get both of them in at the same time. There would have been years when you couldn't have gotten both Sedins in.
Right.
Okay, that's fair. But here's a guy, like, here's an example why I think Kevin's right as far as the competition. So Pierre Turgeon all time is the 34th leading scorer in NHL history with 1,327 points in 1,294 games, more points than Perreault, more points than Iginla, more points than Rattel. Well, that's a lot of points. And he has no chance. None.
Yeah.
And I think Patrick Elias is a 400 goal, 1,000 point guy too. He won a couple Stanley Cups.
So this is a guy with 1,300 points.
I know, but
okay.
Yeah, although there is always a kind of drumbeat on all these committees, and I am still on the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame.
Right.
You got to sort of be careful with comparing statistics
Yeah.
because not all points are created equal.
No, that's fair.
And it's really, like we talk about it in the college scene with grade inflation. There's points inflation. There's points that were scored in the 80s and points that were scored in the 90s, and you got to kind of move away from so and so had this many points, and it's hard because it's human nature. It's human nature to say you're a 500 goal scorer because I do it. Like I know better and I still do it.
Yeah, well, it's normal.
I say Jeremy Roenick and Keith Tkachuk and Pat Verbeek all had 500 goals.
Right.
Tkachuk and Verbeek were gritty sons of a guns.
Yeah, right.
Why aren't they in? Same thing. Roenick was a Tasmanian devil on the ice. But it's when they got their 500 goals and all that kind of stuff. So
it's also, the two different cities and things like that. This is why I always argue for Elias because of what you just exactly said. He scored 1,000 points on New Jersey, a Devils team that was a defense
and won what 2 or 3 Stanley Cups.
So
he'll get in. He'll get in.
And the problem with today, and we've gotten this from politics, is people think there's a right answer.
Yeah,
when we were kids, we'd argue, but we sort of understood, even though we never said it, that there was no right answer. If you wanted to say, Superman was greater than Batman,
right?
We kind of understood that it was, it was just debate. But now they don't. Like people think there actually is a right answer, that so and so is better, and it's really when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to try to.
Yeah, and you can't help but be biased by what you grew up with and what you saw as a. All your life. I saw Elias shoot. Like you could sit there and say Elias is like played on your lesser team, but he played on a team that was constantly beating my team, and he was always part of that. So to me, he's a superstar. Like he was a superstar flat out. But the Devils weren't necessarily a team that people were watching that much. Even when they won Stanley Cups, people were always like, "Oh, I know people who say the Devils ruined hockey for like a decade because."
That's the thing. They talk about Brodeur and Stevens and the defense, and that's really what they talk about with that.
Yeah, and it was that, but they had to score a couple goals. They had to win games. They had to score a couple goals. And
they have another Hall of Fame defenseman there. So
yeah. He was part of that. So it is one of those fascinating things. And hearing Ryan Miller talk was kind of cool. He was definitely.
He was just swayed by the talk. He's not getting in there.
It was funny to hear him because he's such a funny guy to talk to. I've talked to him a couple times. And he's just he's like it makes me feel like incredibly old, and I really don't feel like I'm old enough to go into a Hall of Fame. Like that's what he said.
Speaking of the Hall of Fame, the U.S. Hall of Fame, I thought it was really important that the Lamoureux went in together.
Yeah,
and coincidentally, it happened the same year the Sedins go in, because in the women's hockey world, they're the Sedins. In terms of.
They're true.
And their success. Plus, the intangibles on the Lamoureux is I think they inspired like a whole generation of young female players.
No question on those winning teams. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I was really happy that they were able to get in together. I thought it was important.
That is amazing. And they're such stars. They really did. They scored.
They were great players. They played together.
They scored big goals at big times, They each got big.
Yeah, they were top players. No, it was great. I was very happy. Good to interview. Really interesting people, fun to interview. All of it.
Just to go back to the Turgeon thing for a sec. Russ, the thing that I think works against him is he's looked on A as a compiler and B he played for 6 teams. Now,
but like Randy pointed out, he had a 132-point season. Like you can't hold that against him.
No. He had 2 100-point seasons. He had a number of really good.
Bertuzzi's in the Hall of Fame, so that's the argument.
See that, but okay. But see, this is the problem, like with the Baseball Hall of Fame and the Hockey Hall of Fame. If you're looking for sort of the lowest common denominator, Nellie Fox made the baseball.
Okay, but that's what you look at, and I think Fedorko exceeds. I think Turgeon exceeds Fedorko.
Bill Mazeroski made the Baseball Hall of Fame, and in hockey, Rod Langway made it. Bernie Federko, Clark
Dick Duff. I mean, I
Phillies.
know the ones.
Right. So yeah. I mean, the thing is now, like I saw Turgeon when he was an 18-year-old in Buffalo. He was an excellent player. He got traded for a Hall of Famer in Pat LaFontaine. Does that, and he compiled a ton of points, but he never won a Stanley Cup. But
he was great on every team he was on. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's not like his points ever dropped.
Yeah, I don't like the phrase compiler because it's at a certain point, and actually it was Bob McKenzie.
The Hank Aaron compiled, but he was great.
Yeah, exactly. But Bob McKenzie wrote too that sometimes the sheer magnitude of the points becomes so overwhelming that nothing else matters, and I think that's true.
That is true.
Is Patrick Marleau a Hall of Famer?
Well, that's what that's what we're going to say because of that. Just the. I mean, Mike Gardner was probably a great. A lot of people said Mike Gardner was a compiler, but after a while, you look and you go, "My God, he had, a dozen 30 or more seasons," and so it just all adds up.
What it is, Kev? I'll tell you what it is. Compiling people when there are players that are very consistent, but they don't lead the league in anything, but they're consistent. They hold that consistency against them and call them a compiler.
Well, but consistency is not enough. It's consistency at a high level of goals. Right. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like, just look at the number of 30-goal seasons that the Gardner had, and you're going, wow, it's just staggering.
It's insane. He was such a dominant player for so many years.
He was, but when he was playing, I covered him most of his years, and I knew him. He was a very likable guy.
Yeah.
People didn't have the respect for him as a superstar, even though he scored a lot of goals, because his teams didn't win, and blah blah blah. So
and Russ
Ron Francis to a degree, like I kind of got that same kind of thing. Like
Ron Francis.
You had more respect for Ron Francis.
Oh, much. Yeah. He did everything. Two-way guy. Ron Francis was a star.
He was a number one center in Hartford, and he was a perfect number 2 center behind Lemieux in Pittsburgh.
And sometimes with just saying the players' names, you get that feeling too of whether they're Hall of Famers.
Yeah,
it's interesting. Like certain players' names, just they're like, okay, they've got to be.
Ron Francis too, in addition to being a great player, much like Nick Lidstrom, could have been a finalist for the Lady Byng every year.
Right.
Just because just the way he played the game and carried himself. He's a gentlemanly player.
Which is
that doesn't mean he was soft. It just means that's how he played himself. He just was respectful of the game.
Here's the other thing, Kev.
Yeah.
Like Turgeon has 515 goals. Don't you think when you get to that 500 goal mark, you pretty much should be a Hall of Famer? Like 500 goals is not easy.
I don't believe that actually. I do make that argument, but I understand that there are going to be players. Yeah. I mean, there's a bunch of players now that have 500 goals that aren't in. Now, here's the thing. Who do you think should be in? Tkachuk versus Turgeon. I put Tkachuk in because
I might put Tkachuk ahead of him, but it doesn't mean I wouldn't put Turgeon in at some point.
Yeah, no. I mean that's fair. And in McGillney, like I think you got to factor in what he did.
McGillney should be in. Like I don't get it.
To come over here. I mean, there's and Patty Verbeek.
Yeah.
I would put Turgeon in over Verbeek. I would.
Yeah.
It's not just about points,
And I hope I don't run into Pat.
I don't know about that.
I ran into Verbeek a week ago. I hope I don't run into him again now. But.
Yeah, I would probably put Verbeek in over Turgeon, but it's like one of those things. Like we're talking about and we're doing 28-second analysis. We're thinking about it off the top of our heads and all that. When you're actually on that committee, if you're doing it right, and I think most of the guys try to, like I spent a long time preparing. And you'd go and you'd look at comparisons of certain players, and you'd look about what was happening in those seasons. And so, you might. I guess my point is, you might feel differently after you did an hour's worth of research.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's very true. All right, this is a great show, guys. Appreciate it, everybody. Enjoy South Carolina again. Congratulations to all that ones, Kevin. That's awesome.
Great stuff.
Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on Monday.